Did I tell you what happened at Moose Lake this year? I gave a Valentine's Day poetry reading in the fairy story, and I did Rapunzel. And I asked the people in the audience, how old were you when your golden hair was cut off? And everybody understood that. And then later, at a little party at my house, a young man came up and he said, I didn't want to say because I was shy, but I was 15. And he said, I had long golden hair. And my family said I had to cut it off. And I said, no. And I said, what happened? He said, they cut it off. They cut it off, all right. And he said, I was there weeping and beating my fists on the floor. And my grandfather came in. And he saw immediately what had happened. They lived in Long Island. And he said, you know what he did? I said, no, what did he do? He took me out to the ocean. And he said, you see this ocean? This is yours. Whether you have long hair or short hair, this ocean is going to be here for you. And he said, you know, I was right. I went away. He was right. I went away about 4 years. I came back. Boom. It was really there. He'd given it to me. That's unbelievable grandfather stuff, isn't it? Yeah. That's something the father could not do. Yeah. Couldn't do it. Fathers are haircutters, man.
It's very rare to find a culture where a single man and a single woman have to explore all the great mysteries of life just between the two of them in some, you know, unpaid for house in a suburb somewhere. This is a strange condition for a single man to be able to satisfy a woman's great desire for the wholeness of life. It is impossible, and it's impossible the other way around. If a man has other men to step back into being with, it's less likely that he's going to do the wrong thing or be harmful to that woman. The stakes are not so great. It's not, this is my only chance to get some kind of feeling connection. This is my only chance to get love. This is my only chance to be in relation. If men are with men, then if something's going wrong, the man can say, I think I better go be with the men. I think I better go get held there for a while. I think I better go stand and do that, or else go have some activity with the men. And then let's try this again later.
What is gained by a workshop when men are alone together? First of all, one thing you notice is that men will say many things that they will not say if women are present. And women found this out a long time ago. That's one reason. The women always met alone. Because women will say many things if men are not present. It's so easy for each sex to shame the other. So, but I'd say something like this. First of all, a part of the experience is simply having 80 or 90 men alone and being together with them for a week. I had never experienced anything like that. And then simply the shock of being there with a whole group of men in which the subject is not, is this the right kind of 3.2 that we're drinking, you know, or, you know, or are we a part of 30,000 passive men watching 22 active ones down on the football field? The subject is really soul when you're in one of these. Michael has asked me to do this poem by Antonio Machado. Which brings up the thing that's often mentioned in ancient life, the connection that men have with grief. And it's thought that men have connections with grief because of the relationships with their fathers and with their mothers and with the world, and simply the grief of having to leave your house at a certain age. And then it's thought that there's a grief that men have taken into themselves from the thousands of years in which they were hunters, in which we feel the grief that's actually in nature itself. The Latins had the phrase, lacrimae rerum, the tears of things. And there are woods that have so much grief in them you almost begin to weep when you're in them. And then we would have felt that and also taken in the grief of all the animals that we lived with and died with. But over and above all that, there's said to be a grief in men that has no cause. It's simply there. And it's a part of the whole male being. And ordinarily, we don't receive permission to be in that grief. In fact, early on, many of us were appointed to be the cheerful ones in the household. And you know, boys are not allowed to feel pain. You're supposed to have a stiff upper lip. Well, pain and grief are close enough to each other, so that if you repress one, you probably repress the other. Well, Antonio Machado was a great poet, Spanish poet, and here's a poem of his that I love a lot. The wind one brilliant day called to my soul with an odor of jasmine. And the wind said, in return for the odor of my jasmine, I'd like all the odor of your roses. Machado was about 35 at the time. He'd been working as a high school teacher for 2 or 3 years. He wasn't sure he had a soul. And he said, I have no roses. All the flowers in my garden are dead. And then the wind said, well, then I'll take the yellow leaves, and I'll take the withered petals. And the wind left. And I wept. And I said to myself, what have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? I love the poem because it makes wonderful use of the image of the garden. I mean, that's the walled garden, which was entire when we were children. It had good, firm walls. And there were cultivated pears and things in there. And what happened to it? What have you done with the garden that was entrusted to you? And I like the way it simply sinks down into grief and doesn't try to wiggle out of it at the end.